All right, we are live. This is the Tesla Beat podcast, week number 9. Always in slow fashion. It feels like, I don't know if it's just like Thursday night. It just Tesla continues to just drop us amazing little news flashes. But it's just hilarious. Shout out to Joe. Thank you so much for taking lead on the deck this week. Really appreciate that. But yeah, we have our 4 regular hosts, myself included, Joe from San Joaquin Valley, Jeff, the Jeff Lutz, our supply chain expert, and then of course, Amy, our IPO Tesla investor since the IPO and actually before, just long-term investor that has a lot of history. So
not since before, but I followed it since before.
Yeah, exactly. It's technically, was that 2010 then?
Yeah, 2010.
Okay, so yeah, I think that's the longest that I've known. Actually, I think you're the longest as far as anyone that I personally know. Jeff, Jeff and Joe. I think Joe as well too. But Jeff, I don't know how long you've been riding the.
I'm just over 10 years now. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. So
same for me. I mean, I told this story before, but I was at an event here in San Francisco where they had like all these. The T0 was there, and they had all these other vehicles. There was a guy who actually had a car that ran on water. No idea what happened to that guy, but it was like, it was a crazy event in San Francisco, and the T0 and some other things were there. And I was like, what? Electric vehicles don't have to look like crap? And so it's like,
yeah, I test drove one in March of 2013. I test drove a Model S, and I was like, wow, this is like unlike anything I've ever driven before. I ordered it it was a Saturday. I ordered it that day, and the following Monday I started buying the stock pretty much continuously. So
yeah, unfortunately I came late. I drove a Model 3 in 2018. My wife actually was the one who told me about it, and obviously the rest is history. But definitely started buying slowly after that because, as you know, right, butts and seats is what sold it, but it really does change everything once you actually ride the car. So let's get into it. There's a lot of amazing dimes that were dropped literally last night, Jeff, even this morning. So I thought we could quickly just take a look at the performance of the stock in the past week. Again, this may not necessarily mean a lot, but just more of like what's been happening with the stock itself. It's at up 6%. I do think, a lot of this comes probably from, the continued Twitter overhang that has been, I think, really just, hammering the stock, I think, the past 6 months. But there's probably, obviously, a lot of other factors. If anyone wants to chime in, that's fine. I was just wanting to give a brief on it. Jeff, you seem like, or Joe?
Yeah, I was going to say it's nice.
Please.
Sorry, Jeff. I was just going to say it's nice, but it's not NVIDIA, right? I'm just kidding.
Maybe it should.
Yeah.
I like IPO'd a lot earlier. It was flat for 10 years before it did anything. I mean, flat when you look at it now, but the company's been around for a good 10 years past Tesla.
Yeah. What I liked about this is about last week, we crossed over. If you look at just the technicals, we crossed over the 50-day moving average, and we're on our way. I think it's around the low 200s is where the 200-day moving average is. And when you start getting up into that range and you can close above that range, which we've been rejected now 3 or 4 times, honestly, since September, when you can get up in that range and close above that range, technically it means a lot to the stock. Obviously, we're focused on the fundamentals of the company, and that's why we're here. That's why we're investors. But the kind of the market's looking at the stock. These technical indicators are also important. So closing over the 50-day key, which I think was around 178, and if we can continue to stay above that and approach the 200-day and close above, I think it's huge.
Definitely. I think lots of movement, lots of things that are just like headed in the right direction. I do know, per the shareholder meeting, Elon did say the next 12 months are going to be very, very heavy headwinds. Tesla will continue to do okay or well, but will be very well positioned, especially as we come out of the out of this recession or these headwinds that are coming for the next 12 months. Obviously, can't say the same for potentially a lot of other companies, but really excited to see how well this company is positioned. So let's get into it. All right. So here, this just broke pretty much in the past day or two as well. This is something that I believe Tesla has been indicating as well, where the Model Y should become the best-selling car in the world in 2023. And again, the insane thing is this includes gas cars. For the longest time, their cars have been, some of the best-selling cars within EVs.
Yeah.
But now you're talking about this is the best-selling car in the world for both gas and electric. And this is for Q1, and this is just a huge milestone, I think, for the company. It's insane because I think, Joe, you may have mentioned this on the last podcast, or really just, I think in general, when the Model Y launched, no one really cared. I wouldn't be surprised if the stock actually went down the next day. But this is the car, probably one of the most overlooked launches. Obviously, I know it's similar to the Model 3, but it's really cool to see all this happen. And again, this is just, they're really still in the beginning stages of the history of this, specifically this car, as kind of like competing against the RAV4. But is there any thoughts on this kind of huge milestone that we have here?
I think, I'll just say this real quick. I think that when you look at the price of the other vehicles, that like the Corolla right under it, that's it's like almost 2 times the amount, and it's already outselling it. That just tells you, and it should tell the market, along with the industry of the OEMs, that there is a demand. You know what I mean? And it's we know it. We've always known it, but the fact that it's been a miss for so long, and even when Tesla launched, it was like, oh, you'll never sell, it'll never work, people don't want, people can't travel, they can't, there was all this what they couldn't do, and Tesla's just been able to do it. But I think the price comparison of those top 5 vehicles to the Model Y just says a lot.
Yeah, I might be able to maybe in a little bit I can actually bring up or mention. I'll have to look up. I think it was some people had shared those top 5 vehicles that were actually the volume of like how it actually compared. So I'll be able to bring that up in a little bit. But I think probably the biggest news, just jumping into this, was Ford and Tesla, their partnership. So this is something that I think we kind of all saw coming. But what I love about this situation is, the next generation knows, right? I think if you talk to any kid that's like 5, 6, they'll tell you what the coolest car is. It's a Tesla, right? And Jim Farley got on this Tesla or this Twitter space with Elon, and he actually said he was on a road trip with his kids. And what does his kids point out? And yet their dad runs the company Ford, right? Which has been around a very long time, lots of awesome history, and they're one of the only other companies, American companies, that haven't gone bankrupt. And what does his son keep saying? Dad, look, can we go to that charger? And it's a Tesla charger. Can we go to that one? Can we go to that one? And they're just seeing, what we all have seen and what really Tesla has built. And it sounds like, I don't know exactly if that's something for Jim that had just clicked. But next thing I know, obviously Elon and Jim, really Tesla and Ford, are announcing that they're opening up their supercharger network. I believe it's to like over 12,000 superchargers. And what's also crazy is that Ford is going to equip their future EVs with the Tesla standard. Aptera was, I think, the only other one to do that. So there's like multiple implications. We can, I would love to get everyone's, we can maybe even do a roundtable on people's thoughts. And then I think we can even circle back to some of the stuff that, if we don't mention it ourselves, but some of the points that we actually have on the slide that Sawyer mentioned. But I would love to get each person's thoughts on when this broke, what came to mind, what are the advantages, maybe even disadvantages. And yeah, so whoever wants to kick it off, go for it.
I can go. I mean, this is historical. In terms of, you think about it, Tesla, started a long time ago with supercharger design and supercharger installation, and like with their EVs, they're actually leaders in terms of simplicity. If you actually look inside of the teardown of like an Electrify America charger versus a Tesla charger, and you look at the simplicity of the wiring, and you look at the number of components inside, you'll see that Tesla is probably building chargers at a much higher gross margin, much greater efficiency, and they've even recently improved the installation efficiency, is like prefabbing these sites and bringing them in and dropping them in. So they have all these KPIs, these key performance indicators that they're measuring to really drive the economics and the user experience of charging. And that's why Ford and Jim Farley went in their direction, because he knows the user experience is going to be best in class. But in terms of the economics, if it costs a lot more to build these chargers, then the cost that the provider is going to charge, in this case Tesla, would be more per kilowatt hour, and they've actually have a very competitive rate. So I think it's historical. I think it's a big deal. I think it's kind of an interesting chess move of like, what does GM do next? Because now you've got these two big manufacturers now with charging access, and it's a meaningful differentiator for users of EVs, and it's also a purchase. Decision, right? In terms of like, are you going to buy this EV or not? Can I charge this thing? Can I take it on road trips? So I think Ford, congrats to them. They took out kind of a point of friction for buying their vehicles, and kudos to Tesla, because this is going to give Tesla even more scale. I know that Ford's small and relative EV size today, but they're going to over time build it up. So this actually further helps the economics of Tesla as well, and their supercharger deployment and build out, and also helps reduce frictions with the government as well. So all around, really good thing, I think.
Amy, did you want to hit it?
Yeah, I would say that Tesla started the IPO as being partnered with Toyota and Daimler doing drivetrains. So this is consistent with Tesla to do these partnerships or these deals to license their technology to other manufacturers. And I think that it's a very good sign for when you look at the valuation of FSD, that Tesla has indicated in the past that they would be willing to license that. Ford has actually come out on the record saying that they might be looking for something to license. And then you can start to see how that could become this huge profit juggernaut as Tesla starts licensing FSD to other manufacturers. And this deal is just like the first, I believe, of many deals similar to it.
Yeah, I think just Jim was on Squawk Box this morning, and he was talking about like the reason for him why he did it was the customer base and understanding that Tesla is the leader in this area, and it is what it is. You know what I mean? Like, whether people really like to admit it or not, there is just something to be said for what Tesla does. And I think somebody even put this in the Twitter chat, like Ford's up like 7.5%, while Tesla's only up like 3.5%. And I think those type of metrics says a lot about what happens around this whole thing with electrification. Like, even when Rivian announced and Lucid announced, they were up like great margins. Oh, they're the next Tesla. But I mean, Tesla is still the next Tesla, and everything Tesla touches just has this Midas touch to it. And for people not to realize that and not to like give credit where credit is due is a miss on a lot of people's part. And I think Jim is just, I mean, he's so profound, and I think he's going to go down as one of those people that tried to do everything he possibly could, no matter how this shakes out, is he did everything he possibly could to keep his company in the best possible light and to head for the future. You know what I mean? Like, full board. Like, that's like what he's done is just from just the announcement of everything from the Lightning to the Mach-E, like he's just been steadfast. And it's amazing to see. I mean, I'm glad they're both American companies. I think that's something too, even though for whatever reason people don't view Tesla as an American company.
Yeah. I mean, it wasn't even up till a couple years ago where they then had Berlin, Shanghai, and they were completely American. Everything was shipped from Fremont and made and built here. But yeah, I agree with the sentiment of what everyone said. I do think Ford has been, outside of Tesla, if I was to, let's say, potentially even consider buying another car, Ford would definitely be up there. And they not only is their product decent, but also too, I think they've been the most forward thinking in this process. And I think as much as there is a lot of growth that they will need, especially for autonomy and full self-driving, when it comes to leading in the EV space out of all the other companies, I think that they've been one of the biggest ones. And I think Joe, what you just said there too, that, Jim was just saying like, hey, they are the leader. And what do most of these companies do anyways, especially if they're stepping into a new industry? A lot of them are just partnerships. And I know Jeff could probably go off on that all day, but Tesla is the leader. And I think that this ultimately comes down to customer experience, right? And I think for them, they know, especially Jim probably knows, for them to build out a similar type of infrastructure would be billions of dollars and take 5 years to do. So the question is like, what do you do in the next 5 years? Not that they're going to do that, and even with Electrify America, that it's a pretty horrible experience. It's not something you can rely on. I mean, I don't go to an EVgo supercharger and see that. It's not the case. It's specifically Electrify America, which has, I think they're like the number 2 charging network, really, as far as fast chargers out there. And it's just a horrible experience. And so I think that what Ford's doing, the fact that they're, not necessarily taking an L as far as like admitting that someone else has kind of beaten them, but they're just like, what does our customer need? And how do we help potentially with this transition, as well as they know that they need to scale, because they're not going to be able to move vehicles if they can't even charge their cars. So they know like, okay, let's get rid of, even if this isn't a very, very long-term thinking, partnership. Again, I don't know exactly how the terms work, but this is going to remove the biggest headache. And that's really kudos to Tesla for knowing how do we get rid of EV adoption's biggest fears, and that is charging and range anxiety. So pretty much within the US, every 150 miles you go, you can stop. Every 100 miles, probably, you can stop at a supercharger. But I'll throw it to Jeff. I know you.
I like the read through. I mean, in terms of, I think all of you brought up great points. And one thing I would just add is, now this point of friction has now been, I don't know if you call it friction, but it is. If you haven't made a deal before, there's some level of friction. And now you've got the 2 CEOs chumming it up on a space. They made a deal. Their teams made a deal. They have a procurement relationship together. Like all these things are kind of knocked down. So what's the next thing to go after? I mean, this is a no-brainer for Ford. Now, because they've reduced this point of friction for their consumers. They've and a purchase intent, for their product. And the consumer is ultimately going to not so much pay more. I mean, Tesla is going to claw margins from this, but they're going to have access that they didn't have before. So that's worth something to them versus it not being there at all. But I like the fact that, this now Tesla and Ford are in, they've done business together. So what's the next point of business to maybe go look at together? What's strategic? What's something else that Tesla is ahead on that has capability, capacity, and that could be, a big deal, for them to work together on in the future. So I like what this could portend for the future. And actually, it also shows other potential partners that Tesla is not this walled garden. They're ready to do business.
One thing before anyone else jumps in, I wanted to say, Jeff, the thing that they mentioned too was the software, kind of like Android is potentially releasing the software where it's like, kind of like Android is like the gateway to pretty much all the operating systems for like over 15 different phone companies, or really hardware OEM companies. They could potentially open source, part of their like base for like their operating system. So again, I don't know exactly how that will work, but that was another potential partnership. Again, I don't know if they open that up to everybody or specifically Ford.
I think
with Android, really, if you say there's about 1.2 billion smartphones, shipped global, a billion of them are roughly Android. So it's a big deal. I mean, they've got, most of them are, and then they're also embedded in kind of a little bit in the hardware development. Like if you want to be on the Android open source release, there are some hardware requirements that your device needs to meet. So they're kind of in that, they're in that as well. So that it would really put Tesla, if they become, the operating system for EVs, right? Because there's a reason to do that. It's not so much just the user interface, which I think they have the best one that's adaptable globally, which is a big deal. But it's really the underlying architecture, right? And it's the hardware software architecture. It's kind of the layer one software, it's called, which is is running full self driving, which is running all of the peripherals in the car and doing it in a very efficient manner. The energy performance of a Tesla, right, is one or two. I know they're neck and neck with Lucid, but in terms of power consumption, they have the best solution right now, and I think they'll frog leap Lucid again in this next release.
Yeah, there was a just on the software front, Jim Farley, when he was on Squawk Box this morning, was because one of the guys asked him, kind of like really tried to hardball him into like, oh man, you're using Tesla. What does this mean for you? Whatever. But he highlighted the fact that it's such a software component and it's on the back end that Ford users will still be able to use the Ford app and still connect to the supercharger network. And I think that is, however Tesla has done that, I think makes a world of difference for the end user. They don't need to download a Tesla app. They just can still use their Ford app and then charge. And they pay and everything through the Ford app. And I think that is, however Tesla worked that out, I mean, that's incredible.
They would have open sourced the APIs for like charger
Right.
availability, uptime, a location. They would have open sourced that and made them available, and Ford integrated them. So yeah, it's interesting what it could predict for the future.
Do we know, is this all superchargers or it's specific ones? Do we know? Have they given indicators? Is this like all of this?
Ford said 12,000 superchargers, which is pretty much all of them.
Okay.
But Tesla's making so many per day. It's pretty much open to the network. They're just going to be.
Yeah, I think
they have the code. The API is going to be.
Yeah, from an owner's perspective, I think I do worry a little bit, especially in those heavy congested areas. So I still hope that like heavy congested areas that they can push the Ford owners probably out, in my opinion, because if you go to Santa Monica, there's lines all the time, and now you add in Ford customers, it's going to create, and that's one thing, at least my understanding, Tesla has wanted to protect that ownership, that charging experience, especially in those heavy congested areas. But I don't know if that's changing with this. It'll be really interesting to see, how that happens as it rolls out.
Well, Sawyer made a post yesterday about Tesla is opening up 1 to 2 superchargers every week or something like that for the past year. So I don't think it's going to be a problem. I don't think it's been a problem in the EU when they open it up over there. I don't think and they have way more, there's every company and everything that's charging. You got Porsches, not only Fords or whatever, but you have the Porsches, you have everything else, the Hyundais and everything charging. And I don't think it's really been a problem. I think we worry about that here, but I don't think it'll be a problem.
You have to look at the Ford ramp and install base versus the supercharger ramp and install base. I mean, Ford shipped 12,000 EVs in Q1. So right now there's, one Tesla charger for every Ford that was shipped out in Q1. Yep. But you just gotta just compare those two ramps. I think Tesla will be fine. But I agree, John, on the congested areas. There could be some concern.
Definitely. So one thing I wanted to share, I thought Sawyer did an amazing job kind of constructing. Obviously, we've mentioned some of these, but I thought, some of the things that this will mean from like a kind of like a Tesla perspective. Obviously, we know from a revenue standpoint, this is going to earn Tesla even more. It's going to obviously bring more EVs to the charging station to be used. Again, I don't know exactly. I assume that obviously Tesla will get all of that revenue. If not, maybe there's a piece of it I don't know Ford's getting, but it's going to be huge for actual revenue. And then brand exposure, right? This is going to, obviously it sounds like, Ford still has a pretty small base of EVs, but this is going to be huge for brand exposure. I mean, this picture on the right is a perfect example of that, where, you see Ford and then Tesla, but it's like Tesla's not only a charging network, but it's also a car company as well. And so this is going to continue to expose the brand and be huge in that regard. And then, Tesla is obviously potentially even open to the software. We talked about that. This is along with their mission, which we all know about, which is, to accelerate us to a sustainable future. And I think, again, this just shows a huge confidence really for Tesla's brand in being the leader in the space for not only their infrastructure and technology. But I don't know if there was additional thoughts on those, but otherwise we can keep it moving.
Keep it moving.
All right. So I'll pass this probably to Jeff as he broke this news this morning.
Yeah, this is a big deal in the supply chain world. Gartner is really highly respected in terms of a rating agency and firm that basically embeds themselves with all these major companies, and works with them. There's consulting services and so forth, but there's also, they do this rating, and it's very publicized, and it travels well throughout the industry, and it's a huge recognition. So Tesla was rated, I believe this is the first time they've made this survey and made the top 25. Remember, there's, thousands of companies out there, and they're not only they make the top 25, they're number 14, and there's no other auto companies on this list. GM's been on this before. I believe Ford has been on this list before. Again, no slight to them, but this is huge recognition. I don't believe people, when they think about their investment thesis in Tesla, or they think about kind of long term, they don't think sometimes hard enough about like their supply chain and the work that this team is doing. They're kind of like, they're in the background and just doing amazing things, and they really deserve recognition. And so Gartner, put this recognition on them. It's a big deal to not only enter the list, but you're number 14. There's no other auto. And the factors that are used for this survey, they look at financial performance of the company and like what's the supply chain's role in enabling that. Well, look what they've done with gross margins. Look what they've done with their ability to get supply and basically be the leaders in the ramp of EV. They look at customer satisfaction. So do you have a high quality supply chain that puts out a great product? And if you look at the NPS score of a Tesla, it's higher than anything in the industry. I believe it's in the mid to upper 90s. And then they look at supply chain agility. So they look at your ability to respond to demand and supply inflections, which they've been masters of in the auto supply chain. And it's really, it goes back to the core of like how they design their supply chain. One of the reasons they're so responsive is they don't have this supply chain that's 14 layers and, partners with partners on top of partners. They've got a really good handle, and they've built a pretty flat supply chain, and they've driven vertical integration. The other thing they look at is supply chain resilience. So if there's a natural disaster, i.e. COVID, i.e. floods, i.e. earthquakes, but most recently COVID, they knocked it out of the park. And what's involved with that? Well, that's, supplier A is down. We need to substitute supplier B in, or we need to qualify a different site, or we need to move product from here to here. All the logistics lanes change because of, staffing in this area. They work through all of that. So that's the resilience metric. Sustainability. So they've obviously made huge moves with what they're doing on the energy side, with the reduction of cobalt and in other things. So they're highly focused on sustainability. If you look at the materials that are used in the car as well, very highly focused on sustainability. And the final thing, which they're going to knock it out of the park again, which is innovation and supply chain innovation. And, this is, what things do you invent, within your supply chain that would distinguish you from other people doing the same thing that you're doing? And I mean, we could probably be on this for 2 hours talking about that with Tesla. So this is really well-deserved recognition. We don't talk enough about the supply chain. Karn Budaraj is one of the leads. Roshan Thomas is one of the leads. And of course, Tom Zhu runs the factories. And I just wanted to send that out because in the supply chain world, this is huge recognition.
It's awesome. So it's like getting an Emmy nomination or whatever.
Exactly. I was thinking about that. Joe, we're on the same page. I was thinking about that before the other call. I'm like, how would I actually express, like, what does this mean? I'm like, it is like getting an Emmy.
That's awesome.
And it's a big deal. To me, I'm sure the Tesla team is just heads down, like, okay, what are we going to do, for this quarter, and how are we going to do? There's a bunch of new products to roll out, so they're heads down. They're not going to be, taking a huge bow on something like this. But this is really well-deserved recognition. They have a superior supply chain, and again, not financial advice, but when you're thinking about companies, you're thinking about their resilience, and you think about this gross margin concern. They've designed their supply chain to excel in all these areas and to be the secular grower in EV. And if they didn't, and if they had an inefficient supply chain, you wouldn't see them be able to do this quarter over quarter scale. So it's a big deal, and I think it's a big thing that's not often talked about. I know Amy does a really good job of highlighting so many kind of facets of what they do in supply chain as well, and it's great recognition.
Yeah, I'm a huge supply chain fan. To me, it's been one of the things that I have tracked the closest, not being an expert in it like Jeff is, but it's the only way that Tesla has been able to sustain this on average 50% year over year growth. And so that's one of the reasons why I keep tracking this metric so closely, because there's no way that Tesla is going to be able to maintain the next massive stage of expansion if they don't have the agile supply chain that they have, and if they aren't making some major deals and getting all the supply components in place. I mean, if you look at just even like a factory machine, it has a lag time of a year or longer to order it, and then you need to determine what your parts are going to be and what you're going to build in the machine. And like the lag time in here, you can definitively tell, in my opinion, what Tesla's going to do in the future by watching what their supply chain is doing right now and the deals that they have going in place. So one of the deals I was just very excited about is we're seeing BYD batteries, the structural pack with the Blade battery is in place in Berlin now. They're producing some units with that. And it looks like it might even be the new powertrain. There was a mention of a hairpin drive unit. So I have to see what that paperwork said before. I just saw the new filing on it. So that's an example of Tesla being exceptionally nimble. They had to take the 4680 machines from Berlin, bring them to Austin because of the IRA. So the regulatory environment changed. The supply chain immediately reacted. They ramped up the 4680 construction and production in the United States. But now in Berlin, they had a line that was always designed to be a structural pack dual casting line. And they have supplemented in the BYD batteries there. They have in the works, nothing announced by Tesla, but it has been announced by the Chinese press, a similar deal with CATL and the Shilin battery that will also be a structural pack for Shanghai. And they're producing 4680 structural packs in Austin. So in all three factories, you're going to start to see this cost being driven down with dual casting structural packs. And this is because they have a very nimble supply chain. And then when you talk about innovation, one of the things that I really am so excited about is Tesla's in-house software. The fact that they have absolute data from the raw materials going in the door to the customer service long after sale of the product is really one of the reasons why I think that they're so great in producing the supply chain, and then the nimbleness and the ability to change when they move those 4680 machines. They could just produce Model Ys with 2170 batteries. So they have the ability to use many different battery chemistries, many different battery form factors. So it's the partnership between the supply chain as well, with the design team and with the production team, that just puts Tesla in a different class. And it's such a well-deserved award, and I wish that it actually got a lot of press, because this is a huge deal what Tesla's doing, including they talked at Investor Day about how they're embedding Tesla employees in at the suppliers, and they're checking out suppliers all the way down to tier 6 to get way ahead of any disruptions or problems there might be. I mean, like, this group deserves massive congratulations for the responsibility that they've played in Tesla's growth.
It's also to add to Amy's points too, it's also a great recruiting tool if you're in supply chain. And because Tesla already has this magnet, with recruiting engineers, one of the just greatest, sources of innovation and respect for engineering talent out there. And now to have this recognition, I mean, this is, if you're a supply chain, supply chain has very technical people in it, by the way, too. I went up the technical route in supply chain, but there's also this business element in supply chain as well, which should also be highly respected. And you're going to get eyeballs, now that say, hey, we're top 20. Like, so if you come and work in this supply chain as kind of a fresh out or as a new person, you're going to be working with the best of the best in terms of supply chains in the world. So why wouldn't you want to come on and help, and also, help scale EV? Just another quick riff on, BYD is clearly a number 2 right now in global EV. And I could probably do a whole, conversation on this, but I actually know the team very well. We ramped a couple of major product lines with them, and I know the CEO very well. We met almost 20 years ago, and I have a very, solid appreciation for the BYD team. They're highly vertically integrated, and they've actually done a lot of core innovation to build out these new business units. I saw it happen in front of my own eyes in terms of them, when they were getting into EV. I actually sat in one of their very early EV prototypes, and we drove around campus, and it was just a deep appreciation for the innovation of the CEO, Mr. Wang, and his team. But as I worked with them for over a decade, and now that I've seen what the Tesla team is able to do, I have high respect for BYD, but I'm very happy to be an investor and kind of follow the Tesla story, because I think they're doing some very special things in supply chain when I can compare 1 and 2. Again, a lot of respect for BYD, a lot more respect for what I'm seeing happen at Tesla.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy to think. Well, so first off, that I think that's also too why the majority of people still don't get what Tesla is because the mainstream media doesn't want to cover this. They don't want to, tell other people about it. And unfortunately, a lot of people believe what they're just told on the mainstream media. It wasn't until I bought a Tesla that I was able to see a lot of the fake information that people were putting out about it. And so, as you're mentioning a lot of this stuff, obviously, hopefully people in the supply chain world can learn about this and potentially, make the move to Tesla. But it's pretty crazy to think that, Tesla is not only going to be completely vertically integrated. So not only is every Gigafactory a brand new product, but they're also innovating the whole supply chain world. And obviously you would know a lot more about that. And so I'm just taking bits off the top. But everything that they're a part of, they want to do efficiently and well. And if they can't, if there is a bottleneck, like he was talking with Jim yesterday on the Twitter space, is that they'll step in and do it themselves, right? That's what they did with the lithium refinery. They did not want to do that. How many earnings calls did he keep getting on and saying, can someone please start a lithium refinery? And, obviously that wasn't happening, and they know that this was a bottleneck. And so for them to continue to own their own destiny as much as possible. They knew they had to step in. But it's just a huge award. Again, kind of like getting the Emmy for supply chain. So that's a big deal and very, very exciting. So, all right. So I think this one I'll kick to Joe to kickstart us off.
So, I mean, everybody knows Bridgestone and whatever, but I really thought what I wanted to highlight here was that they are using the Tesla. In all the video and everything that they've done, it's just been like just free Tesla advertising, and I think that gets missed a lot. You know what I mean? Like I know a lot of people like to, well, the haters anyway and skeptics like to frown on Tesla, but I've said this before, but everybody hates Tesla until it's the very metric of what they're comparing it to for success. You know what I mean? And this is just, I mean, kudos to Bridgestone for even like realizing like we need to put this on a Tesla. They didn't put this on anything else. It's not on an Ioniq 5. It's not on anything else. It's not on a Rivian. You know what I mean? It's on a Tesla. And I think that says a lot. And I wanted to know what Amy and Jeff thought about that.
Yeah, I absolutely agree that Tesla's placement is in being used in other people's ads is very powerful. It's one of those things where it's just this more consistent message, like Jeff was talking with the supply chain, where Tesla is just starting to be recognized, like you said, Joe, as like the top until you're being compared to it. I think that you kind of said it perfectly. I don't know if I have that much to add to what you just said, because you pretty much was like you had my mind or saying my thoughts. I think it was a really, really powerful. It's powerful that Tesla's in the ad, and I think that the way you stated it was perfect.
Yeah, Joe's a mind reader again. I think it's a great call out.
He was.
Yeah. No, I think it's a great call out. They want to show the performance of they have a high performance tire and they want to show it off on a high performance car. And I think now that you see this with Model Y, you see this 267K, going to 300K, I mean, you're just going to see more of that as well.
Right.
So yeah, why wouldn't you want to be, I mean, they literally make the number one selling car now. So I think you're see more attraction. Then, I mean, I don't know, is this, with Linda Yaccarino joining, is there stuff that could be happening in the background as well? Literally the one of the top execs on Madison Avenue, not saying that she's working for Tesla, she's officially not, but who knows what could be pointed Tesla's way. So it's all about, really driving kind of positive sentiment around, again, it's got a net promoter score, I think, of 97. So, I mean, customers, like when they buy the car, they like it.
Yeah, that is awesome.
Yeah, and actually, I wanted to circle back to really the Model Y and volume, because I think, Jeff, you reminded me of that. So the world's top 5 selling vehicles, again, gas and electric. Model Y at 267, 100,000. We have the Toyota Corolla at number 2 for 256,000. The Toyota Hilux, which was 214,000. The Toyota RAV4 or Wildlander, 211K, and then the Toyota Camry, 166,000. So pretty much just Toyota, but the vehicle itself for Q1 just beat out everything.
You want to know what makes that super compelling? I wish this data was out there. What are the points of distribution that Toyota's in right today?
Right.
They're everywhere.
They're everywhere.
Yeah. They're everywhere. They're in Brazil. They're in Argentina. They're in India. They're everywhere. Where's Tesla? Tesla's not in those countries I just mentioned. So it's just interesting if you actually look at the kind of the fractionality of like where our Tesla is shipping. It's still at a very early nascent in terms of availability globally versus where our Toyota's available. Toyota's available everywhere. So it's
crazy.
The fact that the Model Y was able to climb to number 1 and be in, I would call it minimal distribution. That's also very telling.
All right, Amy, were you going to say something?
Yeah, I would agree with what Jeff said, that it's super powerful that they're already at number one when there's Tesla still has the ability to enter all these new markets and be able to just increase that lead from quarter one that we're seeing. And there are rumors, of course, of some of these deals and these new markets opening up. And then you look at it, and this is just the Model Y, and then they talking about a car that they think they can do 5 million units of per year,
Right.
and they've shown that they have a product and a brand that is more than capable already at this price point of being number one. So what happens when the Gen 3 vehicle comes out? What happens when they enter all these other markets, and what happens when they get their production costs in the Model 3 to be more in line with the production costs on the Model Y, which actually costs them less to produce than the 3. So, and they can make that car a more desirable car too. And Toyota is a very good indication that one company can stack and have the majority of the top 5, which is one of the things that Wall Street consistently questions on Tesla, whether Tesla can produce 20 million cars, but whether people will buy 20 million cars. And the fact that Tesla is already number one, like Jeff said, not being in all these markets with a clear path to expand out into more markets. And then let's not also forget they don't have the large fleet business yet, which is a lot of the European sales is the people's company buys the vehicle, and it's kind of comes with employment that here's your car. So, there's a huge a new market to be opened up with increasing fleet sales and with leasing, if Tesla ever wants to really continue to do leasing. So that's going to just keep increasing Tesla's lead. I think that we're going to look back at this week when this was announced that Tesla was in the lead in like 53 markets, I think it was, that we're going to really realize it was a turning point in the company, and slowly people will start catching up. It's never right away. It's always kind of stunning to me how long it takes it for some of this news to be something that becomes mainstream, but it will. It's hard to ignore the number one selling car in the world. You just can't ignore it.
Yep.
Yeah, and back to Joe made this point earlier too. I love if we could graph points of distribution on that top 5. I also love to just put the MSRP on there. I believe that Model Y is at 50,000. What are those other top 5 at in terms of ASP? So they climbed to number one. They're probably one of the more expensive vehicles on that list. We know it's much higher than a Corolla. So I mean, it just tells you what that elasticity is at lower price points and then greater points of distribution. And Amy made this point earlier. I make it almost on every single time I'm talking about Tesla supply chain. You want to know what Tesla is doing? Watch what they're doing from a capacity installation perspective. They called this 1.3 million annualized run rate for Model Y a year ago when they made these capacity decisions. So they have a set of information and intelligence that just does not exist, on the outside. So anyway, just higher MSRPs, lower points of distribution, still the number one selling car and growing. It's pretty powerful.
Yeah, I think so. The number 2 was the Toyota Corolla, which I don't know. I just know that that's a lot cheaper than the Hilux. Again, it's a truck. The RAV4 I know actually might be closer to the 40s, depending on how much you spend. Same thing with the Toyota Camry. It could be mid 30s. But yeah, I think it just goes back to the Tesla stretch, and really, I think it may. I think, Jeff, you had mentioned this a long time ago, but it's just the fact that, ultimately people are willing to pay for the best product. They will stretch knowing that they can not only get the best product, something that will last, something that's safe, but ultimately, even as Apple launched into the market, and even now, their phones are insanely expensive against the other phones that are out there, and yet people still continue to buy it. And I think, as you said, Jeff, what is it, like 1.2 billion phones or whatever the number is? But it's like the amount of market share that Apple actually has is pretty small, but it's just more of like people will continue to buy a premium product. And again, this is before they have announced potentially, more adjustments, if that's the case, depending on where the economy goes as far as the pricing goes. And then number two, again, this is not the mass market car. So it'll be really interesting at some point when they announce that, probably more in the line of like a Toyota Corolla, their compact car. That will be really interesting. And again, as Jeff mentioned, they are not fully ramped as far as distribution. They're not in a lot of places right now. And that will just continue to grow as they build more partnerships and go into more countries.
And here are those MSRPs. So Corolla is 21,000 to 24,000. Camry is 25,000. Highlander is, I think that was on the list, 37.9, and RAV4 is 29.6, and then there's a RAV4 Prime that's 44. So all of these products are well below where the Model Y sits at, average of 50,000.
That's insane.
Well below.
But this is one of the things that did drive some of these price cuts, just to put the Model Y below, that few $100s below the average sales price of a new car in the United States, which is where the Model Y is sitting now. Now, of course, they've started some slight price increases, which was just a very smart move by Tesla. It used to be the Model 3 that sat there, and they moved the Model Y into that position as they had production inefficiencies and they were able to charge less for it. And then you see once it hits that price point where when you're below the average sales price of a car in the US, and this goes to what Jeff was saying about the markets the Model Y is in, that's still far above the price that people in some other countries that just have different costs of living than we do here and different incomes can pay. But it's a very much a good price for the markets that Tesla is in, that puts it in the range of the most of the consumers that are out there. And then we're starting to see the Tesla stretch come back, where if people are at all close to being able to afford the Tesla Model Y, they're making it happen because of the value the car brings, the reliability, and the cheap total cost of ownership going forward.
Yeah, because Jeff just mentioned the MSRP, but didn't mention the gas that you have to put into it over 10 years, the cost of maintenance on the 30, 60, 90,000 miles, the oil changes that you have to do. And again, gas prices are fluctuating all the time, depending on, how the economy is doing as well. So even with that, I
forgot about all that. I haven't owned an EV in a nice car in 10 years.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, the nightmares have stopped for you 10 years ago. So, but I think that's the thing. That's just when you buy a gas car, that's just the starting price. It's not the full cost of ownership. And same thing with EVs. I mean, there is some cost of ownership. There are some things that may go wrong, but the ongoing maintenance, the regular maintenance, that is pretty much gone. All right, there are a couple other things that happened this week. Tesla China keeps supplying North America. There was some news this week that broke that China is actually shipping cars to Canada. But I would love to get people's thoughts on that. That was I had to reread that. I thought that was like a misprint, but I wasn't sure what Jeff, Amy, even Joe, what you think on this.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
This has been in the works. This was announced a few months back. This car meets the guidance for the credits in Canada, whereas if it were a U.S. produced car, it would be too expensive, just because of the battery chemistry that's being used and the price point that car is coming in with. We also know that Fremont has pulled a permit to demolish a production line, so it makes a lot of sense to take some of that North American volume that's usually handled by U.S. facilities and bring in some production that's being done at Shanghai, which has been very successful in ramping very quickly and reliably producing a lot of vehicles every week. I've been so impressed with the job that Tesla China has done in ramping that factory.
Facts.
Yeah, the only thing I'll add is, I mean, to Amy's point, I see some of the commentary on Twitter like, oh, why is Tesla doing this? Like, this is something that's planned like many months in advance. You don't just like inter-quarter say, oh, guess what? I think I want to send some cars from Shanghai and create a brand new distribution route and get all the certifications required. That's many months in the making to do this. So I think it gives them flexibility, and it allows them to achieve these these price points to get these rebates. So for consumers, so I this is planned.
It's like 8,000 was what I think the original announcement. It's a significant number that will be heading from Shanghai to Canada, and it just goes to show you again the value of free trade agreements and why when Tesla is going to be choosing another factory, and we had Elon Musk say on an interview there will be another factory announcement before the end of the year, that I would be shocked that if it wasn't in a country that didn't have multiple free trade agreements and the possibility for Tesla to source parts from many different markets with those free trade agreements, and supplies, and the ability to test out new markets and to distribute into many new markets by the location of a factory.
Yeah, no, I just messaged everyone. I was like, I learned something new today. I mean, it's just it's awesome to see how Tesla continues to stay on top of the ins and outs of these trade agreements. Obviously, there's probably a small team that deals with that, but that they saw this months ago. They knew that the cars coming from China would obviously help them to get more volume there, or not only more volume, the rebates specifically. So just again, continuing to just play into those chess moves, making the right moves at the right time. And obviously with the slowdown of the Model 3 as they potentially have Project Highland going, it makes sense that they would fill that through other means.
Right.
Another quick thing that broke, which again, just isn't mainstream media, but this is stuff similar to the supply chain announcement that I think Jeff mentioned earlier. But Deutsche Bank, went to Giga Austin. They were all in. Again, I think it's one of those things where, and Jeff, you're more of an expert, but it's more of like even Sandy Monroe, right? Some of these people that go into these factories and see really like the capabilities of what Tesla's doing, how they're different. Even Jim Farley, I think it was like a couple of, it may have been on the earnings call, but they talked about castings as well, mega castings as well, and how they're going to start using, a more streamlined approach to their supply chain, to the way that they even build cars. But again, this is just continuing more pat on the back and more recognition that Tesla continues to lead the way. And again, you don't see this in mainstream media, and that's why even this stock could potentially completely continue to be overlooked.
Yeah, I'll make a quick point to just call out is a lot of these things are many years in the making. Like
Right.
when you hear somebody saying like, hey, we're going to try castings or we're going to do things like that. Tesla has a rocket company that they make their own custom alloys for their aerospace products. And these things are many years in the making to develop these alloys, to test them, to work with the supply base, to get them ramped up, to get them qualified, and then to actually then apply them to a form factor or call it a location in the vehicle, and then understand how that test, basically the vehicle integration side of it, is many years in the making. So if these companies are going to quote unquote try casting, the question is like, well, do they have some custom metallurgy? Are they going to go to Alcoa or go to Steel Dynamics and basically say, well, what do you got? Like, what's the latest thing that you're doing? And it's probably more of that versus Tesla going to Steel Dynamics or going to Alcoa and saying, this is what we have. It performs, really well. This is our custom alloy. You can't use this for anyone else. And, we're going to, so these things are, my point is Tesla's been working on these larger castings, my guess, the alloys for 5 or 6 years. And to get the alloys developed, get them qualified, get them tested, and then get the supply base ramped up on them is many years in the making. So when you hear another company talking about it, they're either going to be kind of suboptimal from unless they have this great metallurgy team and they've been working on it for years and just never told anybody.
Right.
I mean, I guess it could be possible, but
Yeah.
more than likely they're kind of using existing technology, and they're going to try it out. And by the way, they're going to try it out and they're going to fail, and they're going to have to go, and then they're going to have to go retool and figure it out, because when you do these large castings, one of the things you kind of struggle with, while you eliminate a bunch of parts and a bunch of fit issues, it is difficult to get the right dimensional stability from this process, and therein lies the work on the alloys. So anyway, long story short, these things that they're seeing in the Austin tour are many, many years in the making.
And more than that, when you look at the castings, the design, I just rewatched the Lars Marovi video yesterday again, where he shows that front casting on the Model Y, and the amount of engineering that has gone into that for crash safety is absolutely incredible. It has these ribs that are variable thickness from the front going to the back to do a controlled crush through the casting, so that if you're in a crash, the casting will crush back and then stop at the passenger cab, and then they have the load factors through the doors, through the windows, through the battery pack to stop all that force right before it hits the passenger cabin. So it's the alloys that needs to be able to have this super hot metal go into the casting machine for this large part, and it cools in the amount of it needs to be able to do it in the amount of time it takes you to blink. So the stability of the specialness of that material that they're using is amazing. You can't have any like air pockets in it, because anything like that is going to be a source of wear, a source of weakness. It's exceptional science. This is one of the things that I love so much about following Tesla, is you can go into these deep dives into all these different areas of science and these just world-class minds that have been able to come up with this. And Tesla makes it look easy, but it's because they have the best of the best of the best working at that company, and they're all motivated and driven by the mission and feeling like they're leaving the world a better place. So they're working crazy hours. They're very focused, and this is what results. And of course, other companies will eventually be able to come up with something that's an approximation of what Tesla's doing, but Tesla's lead is enormous in the price that they will be able to price their vehicles for, with the profit margins that they'll be able to have, and then you add in the software on top. And there certainly is room for other companies to be out there and eke by in a 5% profit margin, a 10% profit margin, but they will not be able to generate the same amount of cash flow that Tesla will from selling the same type of products.
Definitely. Thanks for dropping that knowledge on the castings.
Man.
So I thought the last thing, it's just more of a point, just because I think we're a little bit past the time. Battery supplier Panasonic is planning to quadruple capacity. Pretty insane to see this news break as well. But again, they're ramping for crazy capacities, especially by 2030. So
supply chain chess moves, like Jeff said. Crazy.
Definitely. Well, I think, that brings us to the top of the hour, a little bit past. I just wanted to give a quick shout out to Joe specifically for helping with the slides this past week. Give him a follow at SJV Tesla. We also have the Jeff Lutz, our supply chain expert, at the Jeff Lutz. Again, all of their information's in the description. And then Amy as well at SF3_Tahoe. But thank you all for joining us this week. And as you know, obviously have to end with the Tesla Takeover. If you are free July 29th through the 30th, go to TeslaTakeover.com. It's going to be an amazing event. We have May Musk speaking on Sunday, but we're going to have a ton of things for you to geek out, not only on Tesla. There's going to be a ton of experiential opportunities. There's going to be a camping zone, an exhibitor expo, awesome Teslas, other unique EVs, original roadsters, and a bunch of your favorite Tesla influencers, and some amazing panels that are going to be happening. So feel free to check that out. Again, please support all of our hosts here by giving them a follow. And we thank you for tuning in this past week on the Tesla Beat podcast. We'll be back next week at 8 a.m. See everyone.
Yeah.